Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited for this episode and to introduce you to our guest. But before I do that, here's a quote I picked just for this episode. Once doubt begins, it spreads rapidly. John Maynard Keynes. My good friend, Daniel Good, is here. Bay Country Contractors, over 2 decades as a leader within the firm. More than that, more than Premier Investments, more than all the accolades, all the stewardship. Daniel is a great father that makes me want to bear offspring. In all seriousness, I could say that for few men in this world. And God, the type of person that when you're in the room with him, he lights up the room, brings people together. Of course, it makes sense. The director of business development for Top Contractor School, light in my life now. Brian Hess introducing us. Daniel, it's good to have you. It's great to have you. There's so much I want to learn from you today. And I'm so glad that we finally got to do this, to introduce you to the Culture Matters audience. And you've got lots of different businesses, your hands into things, but outside of watching you on social media every day, sharing when I can, I'm glad that we finally get to do this. Thanks for coming on the show.
Jay, absolutely. I'm really excited to be here and share some of my story. I noticed that originally when we were setting this up, you originally dedicated an hour slot for us to chop it up and for me to be able to tell my story. And then I saw you changed it to an hour and a half. So I actually have one hell of a story. So I'm glad you changed it to an hour and a half, just because, like, to get through the meat and potatoes of like just what I've done here and the story of how I've done it. And quite honestly, it's tough to admit, but so much of the story represents what not to do. And I think that's important for our audience to really, really understand what not to do. You know, if we can share a message with the people on an experience that we've already learned, or quite honestly, these education lessons that have already cost us significant money going through that education, I think that's powerful. So, you know, not only to sit here and talk about, you know, the cool things I've done or experienced, but the things that I've learned not to do in this venture of over 20 years. I think it's important.
Are there things, or do you look at it like things that in the past you may not have been proud of, today you look back and you're grateful?
I'm going to tell you they're part of my story. Some of them make me uncomfortable because, you know, I think anything that you're not proud of is going to make you a little uncomfortable. But they're part of my story. They're part of the mistakes that I've made. They're part of just where I came from and how I got started. And quite honestly, I look back knowing now that I didn't have a clue what I was doing.
Well, when you were a kid, like Blake's age, your son, he's about 9, 4th grade, he's going into, right? Were you thinking about being who you are today, you know, at the helm of this business, leading businesses, or were you trying to be an astronaut?
No, I'll tell you that at his age, I can remember sitting on, so, you know, every year, it was like year after year was the same thing. We get through Christmas and Santa would come and Santa would go, and we get through Christmas and the holiday. And then my next thing on my mind was sitting on the edge of the bed with my father at nighttime when he was trying to go to bed, trying to drill him about where he was going to be working. Now, keep in mind, this is January, beginning of February. I'm drilling him about where he's going to be working in June when I get out of school, because I'm trying to put myself in, place myself in a position in his mind that, oh, Dad, if you're going to be there in June, I can do this. Because that was my passion. Even, Blake's 8 years old now. I can remember about 8 or 9 years old, 10 years old. My father put me out there early, real early, 10 years old. I think as early as like 12. He had one guy that lived. He wasn't necessarily a foreman in the company, but he was kind of an all around jack of all trades gopher. But my father had a lot of trust in him. And I can remember, I think at like an age of 12 years old, dad having that gentleman come to the house and pick me up during the summer every morning at like 6:15 at 12 years old. And I look at it now and I'm thinking, wow, would I let Blake go with one of my employees at 12 years old for the whole day?
Wow.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's how I got started. Like it excited me, Jay. It excited me. I started, from the bottom, those places that I would put myself, when I'm having those conversations with him on the edge of the bed, where we ended up in June. I'd put myself in those situations. I would put it in his mind. I would speak it into existence, which at that age, you don't really know that's what you're doing. But I would just plug it into him about, hey, well, what do you think about letting me go here? Or can I do this? Or can I do that? And that's how it all started. Like literally at 12 years old, going in the truck with, one of his trusted guys. And we would go for the day, up before 6 a.m, in the truck with the guy before 6:30, on the job. Back then it was more localized. So, we might have been working 20 minutes from the house or 30 minutes from the house, but, on the job a little after 7. I had a few dollars in my pocket where I was able to get Subway that day on my own, or get
Wow.
day on my own, or stop at 7-Eleven that morning. So like at such a young age, I was given the opportunity to have responsibility.
Well, what type of values did that start to embed in you, you think?
I'll tell you that it ultimately, Jay, where I was trying to get to, when I look back at it and I look at like why it was happening, and I'll get to that in a second. Why? Because like the rest of my friends, the people I went to school with, they would come back from summer vacation and they would talk about the camps that they went to, and they would talk about the vacations that they went on. And I would talk about the sewer manholes I cleaned out that summer.
Wow.
It wasn't in my world, it was exciting. It wasn't as exciting really as some of their stories. But we talk about values and what did it instill? The value of a dollar. Really the value of the dollar and how hard you had to work. My old man put me out there like pre-work permit age. Back then the work permit age was like 14, and I was out there way before 14. He was cash out of his pocket, but I was out there. I was out there handing the 5-gallon bucket down in the manholes. I was out there shoveling and troweling and sweeping and blowing nasty stuff, but I was out there. And I think back then, I swear to goodness, Jay, I think he paid me like $7 an hour. But for a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, $7 an hour is a lot of money. Because it's more money than you ever had. Because at that point, the only money that you ever had was something that came in a birthday card. So a consistent $7 an hour, that was a lot of money. Exactly, that was a lot. So talk about the first initial value I think I received was the value of a dollar.
How bought into it were you? 1 to 10? Like 1, not really, didn't want to do it. 10, you're like the most integrated culture fit ever, because you're a kid at that point. I'm curious, like,
as I evolved, initially the first in my mind as a child, it was getting out there with the guys. Just being there, period, whether I could really do anything or not, because I'd get mad because there'd be a laborer working beside us and he could fill his 5-gallon bucket full of bricks, and lower them down in the manhole with a rope. I could only put like 3 bricks in my bucket because I couldn't pick up anymore. And I'd get mad. So first, I was excited and happy to be there. But then I was mad because I couldn't do what he could do. But the next step, after being there and after, wow, it's like you check the box internally in your mind as a child. You've checked the box. I'm here. I'm here with the guys. I'm here with the guys. I'm eating the junk at lunch. I'm sitting under the tree on a bucket. Like, I'm here with the boys. It's, you get to where you've checked that box and you want to go to the next thing. So maybe it might have not have been that summer of 12 years old, but it was the summer, I can bet, of being, 14. I can remember being out there the summer of 14, or maybe the summer of being 15. And, I've evolved at that point. I've been on some equipment. I know how to start it. I know how to move it. I know how to run it. I'm not on there with my father or the guys. So I can remember then, as I got older, lunch or going with the boys to lunch wasn't the priority. It was them going to lunch so I could go try to run that dozer. And I remember consistently, as soon as they would break over the hill to go to the store for lunch, I'd be on that loader or I'd be on that dozer praying they left the keys behind, shoving dirt in the ditch or doing whatever. And they'd come back from lunch. And this one older gentleman, I remember him, his name was Paul Donaldson, worked for my father. He'd come back from lunch and he'd say, I'm proud of what I've just tried to do. I've been working for the last 30, 35 minutes and I'm proud. And they're back from lunch and they're looking at me. So I shut it down and climbed down off the machine. And I'd walk over there and I'd expect some type of an attaboy. And that old man was so tough. The first thing he would tell me is what a mess I just made.
Wow.
I'd get so mad at him because I've been working like hell for the last 30 minutes, shoving this dirt or grading or whatever. And the first thing he would talk about is the mess I made. But that was the next piece that I developed. It went from like in the sediment pond with the tadpoles to the sewer manholes to, trying to elevate to get on the equipment some. In my mind, going from broom and trial to shovel and broom to, driving the tractor, pulling the straw blower, I was working my way up the ladder. And in my mind, I was elevating. Little did I know at that age, even, going on 16, I'm still, I'm looking not only to get on the dozer now, I'm looking to be good on the dozer. Little did I know then, at that age, you think as you climb through those, you climb up that ladder in the field and you go from one activity to the next, you're really elevating. And when I get to run that dozer really good, I'll be boss quality material. Little did I know at that point that being able to clean that manhole or run that dozer had anything to do with running an organization and leading people. But that was the foundation, the beginning foundation, and the story goes from there. But it's like you don't know what you don't know.
There may be parents listening to this that want their children to be bought in to whatever they're creating or they've created, and they're having a hard time or uncertain of how to go about it. In hindsight, what foundation do you think your father laid for you to, even be talking about this today, all these years later?
I'll tell you, at that point in my life, at, that early adolescent stage, prior driver's license, prior even high school, I look back at it and that piece of my life, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change absolutely anything. Could I had gone on a summer camp? I mean, yeah. Could I had taken advantage of that beach vacation? Yeah, because, I didn't know then. I'd hear the guys tell me, young man, you've got the rest of your life to work. But that time that I spent literally in the trenches, and that's just not a figure of speech. I was in the trenches, Jay. It was the foundation. I can't sit here and tell you, well, it was the foundation of a great business, but it was the foundation of a great person.
Wow.
And I wouldn't change a thing. For a matter of fact, the faster, and I can see in Blake, I can see it happening all over again. And in my mind, I'm like, wow, I've been here before. I was here. That, where he wants to, Dad, does this key fit that thing over there? Because he wants to go over there and climb in there and hit the ignition. And as a child that's 8 years old, Dad, when can I run that machine? But it's important for me to instill in him the way my father did me. We have to start at a different place, and it's not in that loader. It's in that sewer manhole, or it's in the trench. It's literally trench, or it's in the pond with the tadpoles with no socks and shoes on. Like, that's where I started. And I think where, that's the foundation of appreciating what we do and how hard it is, how hard it really is. I think that's a great foundation of building a good person.
Was there something about who he was as a person that the audience can discern some of their qualities and figure out, who do I need to be as a leader? Right? We talk about the law of the picture a lot in the community, so that my progeny, my children, they want to be around whatever I've got going on.
I think when I look back at my father now, I've followed directly in his footsteps for so many years. He was my role model. And, I think the audience would expect the next thing to come out of my mouth was, well, he taught me everything I know. And, then he passed away, and I took the torch and I ran with it, and the fairy tale goes on. Yeah, that's not how it was. Where he was a great man, and he was hard, and he was tough, and he was stern, and people paid attention to him. And I had so much respect for him. The industry had so much respect for him. And he actually, when it came down to the trade itself, he was really good. But I think, I picked up every bad habit. Yeah, by following directly in his footsteps, I picked up every bad habit that he could have possibly had. And a lot of that had to do with the people. Maybe not about, raising a child, because I think for the most part, my father did a pretty good job. He exposed me to things. He was stern with me, but he also taught me how to do a lot of stuff. But I picked up every bad habit that he had, I think. And that made my initial adult journey harder than what it probably needed to be, because of all the bad habits I picked up. But, if we're talking about one thing that he did really, really well, is there wasn't any silver spoons around here in the drawer. Like, they don't exist at all. Like, a silver spoon in this family, could it have? Sure. I mean, he wasn't a multi-billionaire, but he did okay. So could he have given me more? Absolutely. So where I told you, I picked up tons of bad habits. He really set a foundation for what I really feel like, because I know where my heart is. He set a foundation for a good human being by showing me that, he could have fed me with the silver spoon, but instead he made me start at the bottom, at the very bottom. I can remember those summers of 12 years old, 13 years old. Like, I had to take that money. If I wanted a go-kart, I had to take that money and I had to buy the go-kart with it. I look back at it now, even now, what's a go-kart? $1,000?
Yeah.
$1,200? Back then, a new one was like $800. Yeah, I had to buy the go-kart. Could he have bought the go-kart? He probably could have bought the go-kart 10 times with what was in the glove box. But that, it doesn't matter. I bought the go-kart. I worked summer. I bought the go-kart. And that went for go-karts. That went for four-wheelers. That went for my first car. My first car was a clunker. Literally, we pulled it out of the woods. We put it in the barn. We painted it in the barn. And I'm pulling up in school in this clunker that we painted in the barn. And my buddy's got a new pickup. And I'm like, wow. I know my father could have done that, but it's all about the foundation. He knew what he was doing. I didn't know what he was doing at that time.
What was he doing? Why was he doing all this?
It was his way of teaching values, to be able to appreciate a dollar, appreciate hard work, not feeding me with a silver spoon. I was an only child. I mean, he could have, but it wasn't an option.
Do you think you could have been consumed by the bad habits had he not taught you that?
Absolutely. We see it every day. We see we see children coming out of high school and, going to college. We see children coming out of high school and going in the workforce. We see it every day. Children that are just they're spoiled. They're spoiled and they don't appreciate where they came from or what it took to provide where they came from. They don't appreciate it. So could he have done? Absolutely. He chose not to. Often I'd get mad at him. I can remember that first go-kart that I bought wasn't new. It wasn't new, but my neighbor had a new one. So after school, we'd ride go-karts up and down the lane we lived on. And I'd make 2 laps and the chain would come off. I'd have to stop and put the chain back on. Well, my buddy's got a new go-kart.
Wow.
I'm on the side of the lane, putting the chain back on my used go-kart that I paid for with my own money. And he's making a lap past me, blowing the horn. As a child, that's tough. I don't know that I understood why he had a new one and why I was on the side of the driveway putting the chain back on mine. That was tough, really tough. And I don't know that I understood it then.
Did your father start the business?
Him and his partner. So he had a partner, a 50-50 partner in that construction company that they started in 1985.
And how did he end up in the industry?
I'm telling you, I think he wanted more. He wanted more. He was like any good tradesman, they get good. They have an asshole boss where maybe the culture is not good. And, maybe they want more. Maybe they want flexibility. Maybe, something happened. But him and Mr. St. Clair literally, and I mean, you talk about it like him starting me from the bottom. It's probably, Jay, because that's all he knew, because he started at the bottom. I can't remember it, but they started the company with a farm tractor that had a backhoe attachment on it. It was literally a farm tractor with a backhoe attachment that they dug water and sewer connections for new houses. And when it would rain or snow, they'd split wood. And that's how they started. Literally with a farm tractor with a backhoe attachment connecting water and sewers to new houses.
What did his parents do? Your grandparents?
So unfortunately, I was never able to meet his father. His father died quite a while before I was in the picture. His mother, my grandmother, she was a great woman. Nothing, not really, not an entrepreneur, not in business, a homemaker. My grandmother was a homemaker. I think she worked at the grocery store in Charles County for a while. At that point, she had raised her family, and back, 20, 30 years ago, even 30 years ago, it took less money to live back then than what it does today. So, she was able to get by. I think she had a grocery store job.
Hmm. And you come in right out of high school? Like, did you envision yourself taking this business and saying, I'm going to bring it to the next level? Or were you thinking, let me go and do my own thing and show them what I got, because there's that, sometimes you see that.
I'll tell you that literally right out of high school, I've got to give it to him. One thing that my father did do is he knew how bad I wanted it. Just when I say it, he knew how bad I wanted to be in the middle. I wanted to elevate. I wanted to, in my mind, back then I would say I wanted to run men. Here it is 22 years later. If we were to rephrase that, now I'm going to tell you we lead men and we lead women. Back then, I just wanted to run men. And he gave me the opportunity right out of school. I remember they were having at the time they were having a tough financial time in the business. And him and Mr. St. Clair, 2001, they had been awarded a large sewer project in an adjacent county to where we live. And money was tight. They were extended on their line of credit some. And I remember them, they had to sell a farm that they bought. They sold a farm that they had bought to pay the line of credit off and to have money and to have cash flow to be able to make payroll while they got this new sewer job started. And it was a huge job. I remember his first job that I ever full-time got on were 73,000 feet of sewer pipe on this job. And there was different divisions of our company out there. Some guys were clearing, some guys were moving dirt. And the guys that I were put with were the pipe guys, because that's what my father was. He was the utility side of the company. And he literally put me right out there, right out of school. I think 2 or 3 weeks before I got out of school, that lead guy that I was mentioning earlier in our discussion that used to stop by the house and pick me up every morning, 2 or 3 weeks before I graduated school, he quit. And it hit hard because they were close and he had been here since my father started the company. Huh. So literally come right out of school. I think what reason it went this direction is because there was guys on the crew that didn't have a license. And I had a license.
Wow.
So I was 18 at the time. I had a license. So I think that's how I ended up with that guy's company truck. And then I ended up driving those guys back and forth to this job, and ultimately kind of just not really fell into, because it was hard, but kind of just migrated into this. Hey, son, you've got a license. You need to pick these guys up and be an hour away, make sure at 7 o'clock. And that evolved to, taking the men. Well, if you're driving the truck, that means you've got the phone that's in the truck. Well, that means you've got the time cards that are in the truck. You can see where this is going. That means you're responsible for the tools that are on the truck. So, out of school, I've got this company phone. I've got the time cards. I've got like all this stuff that a boss would do or a foreman would do. And I just fall right in it. And those particular guys, they had been here a long time. They knew me. Even at a young age, we'd cut up and carry on. And it worked. It worked. Like, our production was like unbelievable. And it worked, and it worked well. We were on that job for over a year. And so, we went into that job. I mean, I hate to say it, but being transparent, went into that job being broke, had to sell a farm to have a surplus of cash flow to get the job started with. And it worked. And he put me out there. Did he vision putting me out there running men, or did I ultimately be there running men because I had a driver's license? I'm not sure, It's probably the other, but I was there and I had the opportunity to fill these time cards out and mix up with these men and be responsible for these tools and have this company telephone. And it was cool, man. It was awesome. And it was productive. So where I'm going with this, we just can't, the company, I mean, I wasn't there. I didn't necessarily cause it, but they had just came out of a really dark place in business. And now, here's the job. We sold the farm, like literally sold the farm to get the money to make the payroll. And now I'm going to put my 18-year-old son out there. I'm going to tell you that he believed in me. Did he believe in me, or did he know that I was foaming at the mouth? I mean, probably all of the above. So at that point, I knew my father had the trust and the belief in me. Well, that's only 50% of the company. Keep in mind. So now I have to prove to his partner, I've got to prove to Mr. St. Clair that I can do what my father knows I can do, or that I can be good in this position that Mr. St. Clair, quite honestly, might have not even had a say in, because it kind of just evolved. I don't want to let him down. And I spent years. Mr. St. Clair didn't make a lot of noise. He was very respected. He was, a little bit more the business end of the company, where my father was, the tradesman. Mr. St. Clair was the estimator, the reviewing the financials, but I mean, he owned half the company. So now, this young chap is out here in charge of our production crew that I just sold the farm to fund the job. It was important for me as a kid, but at 18 or 19, I didn't think I was a kid. I got a phone and a company truck. The truck's got the name on the side, and I'm responsible for the tools. And I'm not a kid. I'm a man, Jay. Yeah, wow. I not only was a kid, I was a brat. But I had to show Mr. St. Clair that I could do it. And I spent years doing that. Years I don't know if he knew that I was trying to prove to him that I could do it, but I knew I was trying to prove to him I could do it. That was 2001. Wow. I don't want to fast forward this fast, but I can remember later in business where I had my hands around a lot more. It might have even been after my father passed away. I had so much respect for Mr. St. Clair that, I didn't want to make any unilateral large decisions, because I respected him. He was much older. He's been here since the beginning of the time when the company was started. I didn't want to make any, although I was making the decisions when ultimately, I think it was after my father passed away. Ultimately, I'm making decisions for a company that he's half responsible for. I needed to make sure he was on board with my decisions. And I'll tell you, and this is fast forwarding probably too far, so we'll back up in a second, but talking about Mr. St. Clair and just respect and how Dad put me out here. And I knew that Mr. St. Clair, I knew that I had checked the box with him when I went to him one day. And it was, I had been chasing him around to talk to him for several days. I don't remember what the topic was, but I know it was something hard. I mean, it was tough. It was a tough topic. It involved money. And I didn't exactly know what to do. And I remember going to him, and his name was Gene St. Clair. I remember going to him. We had a gravel pit at the time, and towards Gene's his later years in his career, he kind of stepped out of the construction business, and he just managed or oversaw, or some days worked in the gravel pit where we mined gravel at. So that's where I ended up finding him. I got out of the truck and he climbed down out of the machine, and we met at the tailgate of the pickup truck. And whatever was bothering me, or it was financial, or it had something to do with bonding or banking or financial statements or something, I was like, look, I don't exactly know what to do here. And keep in mind, like I said, I've been chasing him for like 3 days to have this conversation at the tailgate of the truck because it was a big decision. I wish I could remember what it was. But what I do remember is he looked at me and he said, are your socks getting tight?
Ha.
And I said, what? Are your socks getting tight? And I said, well, I guess. I guess. You'll figure it out. And he got back in the excavator and went back to work. Jay, I was chasing him around for several days to talk to him about a financial decision based upon something that could have went sideways. And he asked me if my socks were getting tight, if the pressure was on. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, you'll figure it out. And he climbed back in the machine and went back to work. And the reason I moved forward and told you that story is because at that point, I realized that I had earned his respect as well. And he knew that I could do it. He knew, my decision. At that point, he still owned half of this organization. At that point, we were rolling. What if my decision actually wasn't the right thing to do? What if my decision was a financial impact, negative financial impact on him at the bank or him with the bonding company? But the point I'm getting at is it took years for me to get there with him. But he told me, he said, you'll figure it out, and climbed back in the machine and went back to work. And at that point, not only my father, he had put me in the slot. I had done the work. I had elevated some. At this point, he was dead and gone. And, I'm showing Mr. St. Clair the respect that I feel like a partner should show his other path. And I didn't get the answer I was looking for. The answer I got was, you'll figure it out. So at that point, I knew that I had gained Mr. St. Clair's respect as well. So I skipped ahead.
The people listening, maybe someone's in that position now. How can they gain it?
Our mutual friend says often that you cannot do the right things every day and get the wrong results. Mr. St. Clair, me earning his respect or his confidence was merely of him sitting in the grandstands watching the repetitive motion, I guess, of approval. He didn't say a lot, but he was watching. And for me to go to him was such a big, in my mind, it was huge. It's financial. It actually was huge. I think it was bonding. I guess I had gained I had repetitively, not in my mind, I had repeated doing the right thing as a kid. Because my father passed away when I was 26. I was still a brat. My nose was running. At 26, my father passed away. I was a kid making big decisions. I kind of wanted Gene to tell me, son, what you're doing is okay. I kind of wanted, maybe you should move this money or do this or leverage this or borrow. Let's call the VP of the bank. He said, you'll figure it out and climb back up there. Was that the most intelligent thing for him to do? I look back at it, I'm going to say probably not. But man, I had at, let's say, 26 years, maybe it might, I think it actually was right after the old man passed away. So it was in 2009. For me to go to him and be, I just wanted his blessing. I wanted his help. I wanted him to tell me, okay, you're doing, this is okay. I'm okay with it. I'm not nervous. But I didn't get any of that. So obviously I had checked his confidence box.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, knowing what you know today about, like, I guess in hindsight, what did that do for you, you think?
Jay, if I'm going to be completely transparent, I'm going to tell you initially it made me angry because I was scared. I mean, if I'm going to be completely transparent, I was scared. And what was I scared over? This is a big world. I had, I'm going to step back now, out of school, 2001, I'm running men. We finished that job, massively successful. We come back a little closer to home. We do some more jobs. We're a little more successful. I think it was winter of 2003, 2004. My father, this story is going to tell you how I got to where I'm at, but winter of 2003, 2004, my father slipped on ice on a storage facility that he owned. And he slipped on ice. He fell down. He hit his head, knocked him out, laying on the pavement amongst the snow. He had the laborers there with him shoveling, and he's laying there. And the resident manager called me. That resident manager still actually, we sold that business. He still works with me today in one of my other businesses. But he said, Daniel, he said, your father's slipped and fallen and he's hurt. He said, I've called 911 and they're coming. He said, I think they're going to call the helicopter. So I rushed over there and he was bleeding from the ears and laying down. He was awake at this point and doesn't really, he's scared. I'm scared. They fly him out. He's in the hospital for a few days. And I ended up learning that the bleeding out of the ears was actually a huge benefit, relieving the pressure. But he was out of commission. Where I'm going with this, he was out of commission for months. So I went from running that one utility crew to now I'm responsible for the utility side of the organization. And, that's wasn't necessarily planned, but that's how it evolved. And we took a bad situation and I got my hands around several utility crews doing water and sewer work. And we were crushing it, absolutely crushing it. Simultaneously, during that time, probably 2004, Mr. St. Clair was building a house. He was semi-absent from the company. He wasn't around a lot. He was dealing with building his house. Now, Mr. St. Clair not only headed up the business side of the company, he headed up the earth moving side of the company. So Jay, I'm seeing like my pipe crews, that's what we call them, our pipe crews, like crushing it. And I see the dirt moving guys on the other side of the company. Some jobs were on together with no direction. And it's like steam's rolling over here because I see the billing. I know what we're doing. I see we're crushing it. And the productivity on the other side of the company is like non-existent. It's horrible. And it's because there's no direction. I let that go for about 6 months. And then I just started inserting myself in the other part of the company. Very shortly, it was like, wow, if you're going to run them both, here you go. So now I'm running both sides of the company, the pipe crews and the dirt crews. And Jay, when I got my hands around this thing, the old man and Gene were doing about $2.5 million a year gross, give or take. We'll call it the $2.5 million roller coaster. Some years it was like 2-ish. Some years it was knocking on 3, but it was about $2.5 million a year. Jay, when I got my hands on this thing, the first year that I was in control, we went from 2.5 to 5 in 1 year, double. Wow. The next year I went from 5 to 11. Jay, I think I was like 20 what, like 24, doing $11 million. It's crazy. And the more I would do, the more, quite honestly, Mr. St. Clair would let me have. Now, when my father got mended and back out on the road and able to drive again, at this point, it was a little bit of an emotional time for him because he felt like he didn't have a place. He felt like he was chasing me around, trying to find out now where he fit in because he hadn't been involved in so long. You know, he comes several months later from being in the hospital to being home in the chair to now he is able to drive again. And he comes out here and this company is thriving. And he feels lost, you know, and it's such a, like, the tables got so turned because, you know, the strong, sometimes mean guy that my father was is now like following around behind me like a puppy, wanting to know where the dump trucks went to work today because he saw them leave the shop and he saw them come back, but he doesn't have a clue what's going on. And now he's asking me where he can fit in maybe next week. And that's how that whole thing evolved from, like, you know, me, you know, 10 years before that, you know, I'm trying to figure out where I fit in. You know, he comes out from being hurt to now trying to figure out where he fits in. So, you know, we talked about a lot about my father. We talked a lot about Mr. St. Clair. I do feel like that when I really stepped in and started taking over some of Mr. St. Clair's responsibilities, now that I look back at it, I don't know that I knew it at the time, but now that I look back at it, I feel like the more things that I would, you know, again, I'm telling you, I'm foaming at the mouth as a kid. You know, I want to do it all. I can do it all. The more I attempted to do, the more he let me do. Because I feel like the more that went on my plate, the less that came off of his plate. I didn't realize that was happening that way back then. But now that I look at it, it's crystal clear. The more that I would do, the less everybody around me had to do, even at the top. And my father, way, I can't say that because my father, I mean, really, he ate and breathed and slept in his little boy. I mean it. Crazy about his little boy. Even at that point in my life, I'm still his little boy. But I'm telling you, the rest of the organization at the top, the more that I could do and the more that I would do, the more they let me do. I didn't realize it was happening like that.
And was that bad?
Well, Jay, I'm gonna be honest with you. Who, like, really, and not to attack anybody that was at the top, but who takes their organization that, whether it's doing 2.5 million or 5 million or 11 million, and turns it over to a kid? I mean, a kid in this business. This is a tough business. Who does that? If I were to do it now, would I set the foundation for Blake? I'd do the best I could, but I don't know that I would turn my $11 million or $2.5 million business over to him.
Well, do you want 11 to go to 60?
I'd love to.
What? Sign him up.
That's right. Sign him up.
I'm sold on the goods.
That's cool. That's awesome.
I mean, how much of it could have been this belief?
I'll tell you, Jay, I think I did the best that I did the best that I could do. And I mean that. You know, we could title this discussion "What Not to Do." You know, Daniel Good and the story of what not to do. Because I didn't know, Jay. I mean, I didn't know. You know, Dad went from, "Here, son, I know you can do it. Lead," you know, I'm going to say lead. It actually wasn't lead. Back then it was run these men. Who, he slips and falls down on ice, and it's, "Here, I have to run all these men," to now we're making money. I need to go save the money that's being wasted over there. The term that you and I know of leadership, real leadership, when I look back at it, I don't think there was any. You know, did my father set values? Yeah, absolutely. But when I got out there and I started running and life started happening, he fell down, he got hurt. And then when he came back, everything's happening. And he's chasing me around because I'm moving faster than him. He found himself chasing me, not leading me. So Jay, who's leading me? Well, Mr. St. Clair, the more I wanted, the more I got. So I ask you again, who's leading? Who's leading me? Okay, so Jay, now we're running the pipe crews, we're running the dirt crews. Now I'm in the office and I'm controlling what I have an influence. Can't say I'm controlling at this point. I have an influence in the office. I'm reviewing the timesheets. I'm reviewing the invoices from the vendors. Concrete, asphalt subcontractors, I'm reviewing them. I'm approving them. The more I could do, the more I got to do. Who's leading me? "2008 shows up, 2006, 2007, we're rolling. I sit down for the first time ever with the accountant. The accountant looks at it. He's like, wow, $11 million. You're doing good job, son. Wow. Do you realize how much you're going to have to pay in taxes? Like, no, sir. He said, a lot. He said, I think you need to run some more of your expenses. He's asked me a list of questions and he said, I think you need to run more of your expenses through the company. I said, well, I don't know. I don't know if I understand what you're saying. He said, I think you need to buy more shit in the company. I said, well, you don't have to tell me twice. Sign me up. Because at that age, Jay, that's how you've elevated, right? You elevate at that age. So I say that age, there's people a lot older than you and I still think that you have arrived by buying things.
Yeah.
But when that man told me I needed to run more things through this company, look out, because in 2006, I had a girlfriend that had a new Lincoln. We had a new SUV. We went to the Bahamas twice a year, and I had new yellow iron everywhere. And when I'd go in the bar on Saturday nights, I would hear it. You're rolling, aren't you, boy? You're rolling. I see blue trucks everywhere. Jay, that felt good. When you're a kid and you're going to the Bahamas twice a year and your girlfriend got a brand new car and you've got a new family SUV and you just bought a new house and you've got new yellow iron everywhere and you've got mechanic trucks and just, I mean, you've got stuff. You've arrived, right? You've arrived. I've arrived. I'm a kid. At that point, and I was 23, 24. I've got trucks and SUVs and all this stuff. We're crushing it. I'm hearing it in the bar, in the steakhouse on Sunday night. I'm hearing it in the community. I really felt like I had arrived because I had all the stuff. 2006, 2007, 5, 6, 7. 2008 shows up and I've got all this stuff. And Jay, most of the time when you get all this stuff, you acquire 60-month notes that go with them. Okay. Keep in mind, I bought a lot of it in 5 and in 6 and in 7. That's 3 years. That's 36 months. I'm still carrying 2 months or 2 years, 2 more years of payment books. 2008 shows up and the bottom falls out of everything. The next shopping center, the next condominium complex, the next doctor's office, the next whatever doesn't happen. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do with these payment books I'm carrying? Because Jay, I had all the stuff. I had the house, I had the cars, I had a girlfriend, and I had the equipment, and I had the dump trucks, and everything's painted. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Old man's still here. It's only, it's 2008. He's here. We come into the end of 2008. I think it was September of 2008. We're deep in this recession now. We're deep. I'm playing damage control because we don't have the backlog. It's tough. I'm a kid. Remember, I'm still a kid. And he had a knot pop up on his shoulder. And I remember him coming out of the shop, mom coming out of the shop, and he said, Courtney. She was like, Courtney, pull your shirt up and show that to Daniel. And it was like half of a softball on his shoulder. And I was like, what in the heck is that? I said, man, you got to get that checked out. He said, okay. September of 2008. And he went to the doctor. He came back to me a couple of days later and told me he had lymphoma cancer. And I was like, oh my God. I always wondered what it was like to be one of those families that had cancer and illness and sickness in your family. I didn't realize we were going to be one so soon. I said, well, so what are they going to do? He said, they're going to treat it, and they say it's treatable. I was like, all right, let's go. So I started carrying him to the doctor. So now I'm carrying him to the doctor. He's getting his lymphoma treated. It's responding. He's in a great mood. Loses his hair, loses his eyebrows, loses everything, but he's in a great mood. And we get through it. And during the process of getting through that, they do these PET scans of your body. They found a spot on his lung. Keep in mind, we got lymphoma. We found a spot on the lung. We're in the middle of a recession. I've got payment books. I'm carrying him back and forth to the hospital, to Baltimore. My mother won't drive out of the town that we live in, so I'm carrying him to the hospital. Wow, this is hard, Jay. And they go in, they do a little biopsy of the spot on his lung, and that's lung cancer. Totally different kind of cancer. Not lymphoma on the lung. This is lung cancer. How in the world do you have two different kinds of cancer? So now they start treating that. And that wasn't so responsive. So in the middle of this recession, no private work, payment books, like this is bad. And old man's got cancer. And Mr. St. Clair, keep in mind, he's semi-removed. He's still here, still getting a paycheck, but he's really not doing much. Respectfully, he's not really engaged. So what am I going to do to save the company? What am I going to do to save my father? So we started to decide that we're going to stick our nose in government contracting. Jay, government contracting requires a different type of accounting. Government contracting requires a bond program. So now the internal accounting that I'm doing, quite honestly, isn't sufficient, because you have to have financial statements, reviewed financial statements that cost a lot of money. And they need a certain level of information that you have to give them to give you the financial statements. So I had to hire a new in-house accountant. So a friend of a friend of a friend, we got a new lady in here, and she was doing great. And we're crunching these numbers, and I'm taking dad back and forth to cancer. And it's not great, but I'm making it. We're making the payments. And I think we had to loan the company a little bit of money to make a few weeks of payroll, but somehow we're making it. I might have sold a couple things to get some liquid cash to be able to make the payments and make the payroll, but we're making it. Start crunching these numbers with this new accountant, spending like days, weekends, evenings. Simultaneously, let me say that I've been in a relationship now for like almost 10 years with a great girl right out of high school. I'd been with a girl in high school that stood by me for 10 years while I did all this craziness, who deserved nothing but the best. And I'm in here crunching numbers late at night and end up getting tied up with the new accountant. What a mess. Recession. Father's got 2 kinds of cancer. And I end up having relations with the accountant. Behind, oh man, what a mess. But you know why, Jay? Because I was powerful. I was powerful. You know why? Because I went to the bar and they complimented on the trucks, and I had all the equipment, and I had the house and the Lincoln and the SUV and the 2 trips to the Bahamas. I was powerful, Jay. Nobody could stop me. Nobody would tell me no. I did what I wanted, including, I mean, I hate to say this, I would have what I wanted, because that's how you arrived. And I'll never forget, in the middle of all that mess, I'm laying in a bed on a Sunday morning, and the girl I've been with for 10 years, we're laying there, we're awake and watching cartoons on Sunday morning, and the phone rings. And it's one of her girlfriends. She was like, she asked me to come down to the hospital. So-and-so's in the hospital. So she put on her clothes and ran out the house. And I knew at that point, I just knew something was going down. And Sunday morning, I think it was May 24th, 2009, my life changed. Because when she came back from visiting her friend at the hospital, she knew the whole story. She knew what I'd been doing. She knew who I'd been doing it with. She knew everything. And where my first reaction was to lie my way out of it, within an hour, I was like, well, that's not going to work. And I told her the whole truth. So now, keep in mind, Father's got 2 kinds of cancer. We're in the middle of a recession, and the girl, the only real serious relationship that I ever knew, with an amazing woman from an amazing family, just left out the driveway with a suitcase of clothes. And I'm left in this house with her decorations and her Longaberger baskets. Jay, that was bad. That was bad. That was May. We kept getting treatment through cancer into the summer, through the summer. We get halfway through the summer and go to take him to one of these appointments. Oh yeah, let me step back a second. When she left, it's because the accountant that I had here in the office, everybody knew. I'll just leave it at that. Everybody knew. She had a family. She had a husband. She had children. Everybody knew. And she had to make a decision whether she was going to choose her job or her family. And quite honestly, she did the right thing. I never saw her again. That Friday when she left here, I never saw her again. When Monday morning came around, I was left with nobody to pay bills, nobody to do payroll, nobody to do anything. And Jay, I mean, I lay pipe and dig dirt and run people. I don't know how to do payroll. I don't know anything about that shit. And I came to work on a Monday, and I had nothing. I had no girl at home. I had no lady in the office, no accountant, nobody to pay bills. Father's got cancer. I think even that Monday I had to take him to treatment. I've got nothing, and a business and men that depend on me. And Jay, I didn't do the recession, but I've done the rest. I've done the rest of this. I did this. I put myself here, and it was bad. I got through it. Man, it was painful. Get through the summer, midsummer. The doctors tell us that they're going to go from treating the cancer to making them comfortable. I said, so like, you're going to make him comfortable while you treat the cancer? He said, no, we're going to make him comfortable. Well, I don't understand. I was like, you got to dumb it down. I don't understand. They said, there's nothing else we can do for your father. So now I lost the girl. I lost the accountant. We have no work. I've got the payment books. Money is going out of here in dump truck loads. And I'm going to lose my father. Single hardest most year of my life, ever, ever. And where I didn't do all of it, Jay, I did most of it. I did a good portion of it. I brought it all myself. Hardest year of my life, 2009. The old man passed away August 10th of 2009. I took the week between his passing and the funeral to handle business. And I went back to work immediately after. I'm telling you, 2009, hardest year ever in my life. Ever, ever. Wow, that was hard. But even then, even after I made it through that year, I still didn't know what I didn't know. I still went back. I might have not been having relations with people in the office, but I still had the mindset, the stuff, the things. That's how we elevate. We got to have this. We got to buy that. We got to have 100 people. And it was wrong. I was still running men. I wasn't leading men. And man, it was hard. It was super, super hard. But we ended up going and we got some government work, and it was higher margin. We had to travel to Quantico, Virginia to get that work, which is an hour and a half from home. But we got the work and we built the road. We built the roads, the main road into Quantico. It's still that way today. I had the opportunity to build that. Got a big road job and a big sewer job in Quantico at the same time. And just a few months after putting my father in the ground, I'm over there in a little apartment working day and night to try to fix this mess I've got, at least the financial piece anyway. And we got it. We got it. At least that time we had it. We got it. But I'm still not in the mindset. I still think in 2010, 2011, Jay, heading into 12, I still think it's about the head count, about the stuff. It's about the stuff, the dozers and the rollers and the trucks and the stuff, because that's how you elevate. And 2011, I think we had one of our biggest years ever. Biggest in volume, wasn't any profit there, but we had the biggest year in volume. Again, and that was just because of the stuff, because I had stuff everywhere. You're doing $13 million in work. Now you can get the stuff. Not thinking, not really, quite honestly, I've been in this now for years, but I didn't have a leader. I was never led. So I'm like winging it. I'm getting the stuff. I'm buying the dozers. I'm buying the dump trucks. We're buying the pickups. We're getting the work. We're making it through the recession, but it's tough. We're making it though. Come out of that set the stage. I can say one thing that recession did for us is it put us in Northern Virginia. It put us in the government contracting arena, and it educated me on how that works. And I'll tell you, for the next 10 years, from 11 going into 12 until just about a year ago, right now we have one large government contract still in our backlog, but we primarily were a government contractor for about 10 years. And so where I ended up going there out of desperation during a recession, for the next 10 years, that arena, that government contracting arena, was really, really good to us. So I can appreciate what I learned and the relationships that I established through just going to that arena, going to that platform out of desperation. But go ahead.
In closing of part 1 of the Daniel Good story, 16, 17 years from now, Blake is listening to this. What do you want him to take away from this conversation?
Jay, it's whether it's Blake or any other aspiring entrepreneur. So many people make the mistake. You know, so many tradesmen go out here and they're good at a trade. They do a trade. They work 7 days a week doing the trade. They get a little bit of jingle in their pocket. Maybe they go in business doing that trade. They get a little more jingle in their pocket, and they start to want to elevate the same way that I did. And how's that? Well, psychologically, how do you elevate? You get the stuff. You get the stuff. You get the stuff. Go on the trips. You get the trucks and the cars and the dozers or whatever. I'll forever, never, ever, ever, ever change my mind that elevating in life or in business, and nobody will ever tell me any different. It actually never has been. I just didn't know any better. But it'll never be about the things. And it'll always be about the relationships. It'll always, always be about the relationships, because all that stuff I had where they created a dopamine hit at the time, they're depreciating assets. If you pour into relationships properly, they just get better. If I go wax that thing, it's still going to get older. Eventually, it's going to wear out and fall apart. If I pour into our relationship properly, it just gets better. So whether it's Blake or your future child, or, you know, anybody on the street that wants to know, you know, how do we get started? You know, what do we do? It's about the people. Will always be about the people. And it's not running the people. It's leading the people. And they don't even have to be people in your organization. It can be leading a conversation between two people that have a relationship. It's always about the people. If you put the people first, the rest of it really does take care of itself.